Welcome back. We're doing session 3 of Kelly's practical tips. Today what we're going to do is I'm going to go over what is one of the most common questions in the shop because we do so much streamer fishing. We're going to talk about, I even have my cheat sheet here so I don't forget. We're going to talk about full sinking is what a lot of people call them, but they're actually longer headed sinking lines. They're not completely full sinking. By longer heads, they're generally, I mean, lines that are 30 foot and above versus sink tips. A sink tip is generally 5 to 10 feet. And I'm just going to go over a couple things about the sink tip, and then I'm going to go into the longer tips and why we prefer those over the sink tip. The sink tips originally were designed to nymph fish. That's important because just because it sinks doesn't mean that it's perfect for a streamer. And I mean, streamer lines have come, man, they're probably the most advanced, the biggest advancements in fly lines in the last probably 10 years because people are doing so much streamer fishing. So the first thing about the sink tips is that they were really not designed to fish a streamer, they're designed to nymph fish. So that's why they have short heads, 5, maybe 8, 10 feet. They were designed to let the fly go to the bottom passively. That's a big part of it. They were designed to go, you throw it out like you would nymph fishing. It was called the Brooks style. It'd go to the bottom, and then you could mend the line and feel it all the way through. So, they originally were done for that. But we start using them for streamer fishing. Are they good? Are they bad? They have one advantage and a lot of disadvantages, in my opinion. The disadvantage is because the head is short, it doesn't allow you to throw a big fly. And by big fly, I mean a fly like a big barely legal. Now that almost everything has become articulated and a 5-inch fly is pretty common, thinking that you can use a shorter, lighter head and still be efficient is just backwards. If you're throwing little tiny, like a little JJ number 4, which by the way, 6 years ago, this would have been a big fly. By today's standard, it's a trailer. It's like something we'd put behind a real fly. But back to the tip versus the longer heads, or the full, they're commonly called full sinking, but they're not truly full sinking. They're just longer. So the tip is a 5-foot head, let's say. Its advantage is that if you're in really small water, or you're doing passive retrieves. By that I mean you're going to throw it out and kind of let it swing, more wet fly-ish, if you will, and not so streamer. And so that's its only advantage in small water or smaller flies. Now, the advantages to the longer heads are that they carry the big flies and the small flies more efficiently. Because the line's longer, there's more weight to it, so on the bigger fly, it throws the fly out. And it carries. I think most people take a long tip and they cast it more efficiently than they do a short one. And I can tell you from practical, for myself, I have a lot of trouble with those short heads. They hinge, and if there's any wind, they're just kind of like a disaster. They're everywhere. So I much prefer the longer heads. So the longer head, I'm saying it's like a 30-foot head. That's what most of my lines are. And so I have a longer head, it carries the bigger fly more efficiently, it's more accurate because the line's not hinging, and it allows the fly to stay in one depth all the way back. I hit the fly down. We don't passively retrieve flies very often. We throw them out and we start retrieving them very quickly. So the longer head stays deeper, or whatever depth I want it, and it doesn't follow the floating portion. So the fly stays in one depth all the way back. The next most common question we get is 200 versus 250 versus 300. 200, 250, 300, whatever that number you hear is grains per foot. And so the bigger the number, the heavier the sinking line is. So a 200 and a 250 are probably the most common. You'll see a lot of people that swing really big flies that tend to swing deeper and less aggressive on the retrieve, more of a passive kind of steelhead swing. You'll start seeing guys go 300, 350s even, just to really get out there and swing those big holes. On the runs that we do, on the way we fish, more common is that we actively retrieve the flies, so we generally use a 200 and a 250. The 200 is 200 grains per foot, still a 30-foot head. I generally associate the 200 with a 6-weight rod, and generally on smaller flies. I would rather have a little bit heavier, so if I'm going to the bigger fly, I generally go to a 7-weight and I go to my 250s. That's probably what I fish 95% of the time, actually. It allows me, because I have no disadvantages. The heavier line, the only disadvantage is if I'm fishing really shallow water, it might get down a little bit too fast, but you can just change your retrieve. So, in summary, if I'm fishing a short tip, it's generally going to be in small water, almost always walking, or on a more passive retrieve. On the longer tips, we generally put 200s on our 6-weights, 250s on our 7s, 300s would be for bigger flies and swinging deep. But overall, I think the most versatile way to fish a streamer is with a 200 to 250 grain line. It carries the big fly, and it allows you to stay in one depth all the way back. It does not chase the floating portion. And I just want to re-emphasize that if you think you're going to fish more efficiently with a shorter tip, you will be sorely disappointed, because it's a hinge point. I think if you'll give the longer heads a try, you'll see that they're more efficient, they're faster, they're more accurate, and they're way more versatile than the shorter heads. Hope that helps you out. Thanks.